Welcome to Lesson 7 of this explainer. Today, we're diving right into how a rapidly advancing civilization is literally repurposing our ancient biological hardware for the future. You know, we tend to think of our minds as these sleek, modern rational engines, but underneath it all, we're running on millions of years of legacy evolutionary code. So we're going to unpack exactly how that code works, where it completely glitches out, and why mastering it is absolutely crucial for our next giant leap as a species.
To kick things off, I want you to think about a really specific physical sensation. Have you ever experienced a sudden, totally euphoric, shivering feeling? Some people actually call it a skin orgasm, right at an incredible musical climax. You know the feeling, right? It's that exact moment when a soaring vocal hits or a massive beat drops, and it sends genuine goosebumps racing down your arms.
What's truly mind-blowing here is that this reaction, known scientifically as Frisson, is actually our brain taking a super ancient thermoregulatory defense reflex and basically upgrading it into software for profound emotional pleasure. Think about it. Millennia ago, our ancestors fluffed their fur for warmth or to look bigger to predators. Obviously, today, we don't need that. Instead, when a piece of music suddenly violates our acoustic expectations, like say, a huge, sudden change in volume, our brain registers a mild startle response. But then, almost instantly, it realizes the sound is actually beautiful. When that happens, your brain's reward centers, specifically the chordate nucleus and nucleus accumbens, just flood your entire system with a massive surge of dopamine. It literally converts that ancient survival reflex into pure auditory euphoria. How wild is that?
To wrap our heads around this evolutionary trajectory, here's the roadmap for today's explainer. First, ancient biological hardware. Second, glitches in the system. Third, frontiers of consciousness. And finally, the Type 1 transition. Starting right off with Section 1, Ancient Biological Hardware. We're going to look at the deeply ingrained evolutionary codes that kept our ancestors alive and practically forced them to bond together in a really dangerous world.
So, have you ever walked into a pitch-black room, seen a terrifying shadow lunge at you, only to realize half a second later that it's just your coat rack? Well, that is nyctophobia, or the fear of the dark actively working to save your life. See, humans lack a tapetum lucidum. That's the reflective layer you see shining in the eyes of dogs and cats at night. Because we don't have it, our night vision is frankly terrible. And since we're at such a massive sensory disadvantage in the dark, our amygdala just smashes the panic button. It hyper-amplifies our hearing, which is why a normal settling house suddenly sounds like heavy approaching footsteps. It also triggers pareidolia. This forces our brain to find familiar faces and threats in totally random shadows. Evolution programmed us to prioritize safety over accuracy. Because, let's be real, it is way better to be spooked by a jacket than eaten by an actual predator.
Now, just as our fears are hardwired into us, our drive for human connection is a sequential neurochemical mandate. It's designed specifically to ensure species survival and cooperative child-rearing. Love isn't just some abstract social construct. It is a highly sophisticated three-step biological algorithm. It kicks off with lust, which is driven straight by the hypothalamus. Then, it transitions into attraction, where a massive surge of dopamine and norepinephrine creates that racing heart and obsessive infatuation we've all felt. Finally, to make sure parents actually stick around to raise their offspring, the brain shifts into attachment mode. It releases oxytocin, often called the cuddle hormone, and vasopressin to create long-term trust and deep emotional security.
However, it is terrifyingly easy to hack this biological software. High-control groups like cults completely exploit our natural need for attachment. They use tactics like love bombing to trigger that exact same dopamine-rich honeymoon phase we just talked about. But if you look closely at the structure of this manipulation, it gets dark. In a cult, the leadership is unquestionable. Any criticism is punished as literal treason, and your individual identity gets rapidly absorbed into the collective. Leaving comes with intense social ostracization or threats. It's a complete hijacking of our ancient natural bonding algorithms, weaponized entirely for control.
Moving on to Section 2, Glitches in the System. As you can guess, this ancient biological machinery isn't flawless. Occasionally, our internal reality completely misfires.
And that brings us to déjà vu. It literally translates to already seen. It really challenges our linear perception of time because it essentially acts as a millisecond processing delay right in our temporal lobe. There's this idea called the dual processing theory. It suggests that normally, information hits your conscious mind and your long-term memory at the exact same split second. But if there's a tiny desynchronization, just a millisecond lag, your brain actually writes the current moment into your memory bank right before you consciously perceive it. So you get this really eerie sense of familiarity. Neurologically speaking, your brain is playing a rerun of an event that is actually happening right now.
Now, while déjà vu is an individual sensory glitch, the Mandela effect is a collective false memory glitch, and it completely makes us question the reliability of our shared historical records. It's absolutely fascinating when you think about it, because it suggests that entire populations can hold collective memory files that are just systematically corrupted. Let's test your own memory on this for a second. Do you clearly remember the Monopoly Man wearing a monocle? Or maybe Pikachu having a black-tipped tail? Well, physical documentation proves that neither of those ever existed. The Monopoly Man never ever had a monocle. Pikachu's tail has always been solid yellow. And those beloved children's books? They are actually the Berenstain Bears, ending in AIN, not EIN. No way, right? This brilliantly illustrates something called psychological confabulation. Millions of people confidently misquote cinema history, absolutely swearing that Darth Vader said, "Luke, I am your father." He didn't. What he actually says is, "No, I am your father." This glitch happens because our brains absolutely hate incomplete or awkward data, so they just smoothly fill in the gaps with logical assumptions, effectively rewriting reality to make the story flow better in our own minds.
But here's the thing. Our mind's ability to alter reality goes way beyond just memory. It extends directly into our physical biology. Our expectations can actually alter biological states. Take the placebo effect. It turns optimism and trust into an internal pharmacy releasing real, measurable dopamine and opioids that actually reduce pain. But look at its dark twin, the nocebo effect. If you anticipate harm, your pessimism and anxiety trigger cortisol and stress chemicals. And that literally heightens your pain sensitivity and induces genuine physical distress. So what you believe directly dictates what your biology physically renders.
Let's dive into Section 3, Frontiers of Consciousness. Once we really understand the hardware and these rendering glitches, we start to see how this all builds toward the high-speed, boundary-pushing capabilities of the human mind. We hear people talk about gut feelings all the time, but intuition isn't some mystical force. It's actually a hyper-fast biological calculation. While your conscious mind is processing maybe 40 to 50 bits of information per second, your subconscious is chewing through a staggering 11 million bits per second. Heuristics are the mental shortcuts that allow, say, a master chess player to instantly spot a winning move just through rapid pattern matching. Yet the trick is we have to constantly ensure these mental shortcuts don't devolve into bias. Bias occurs when our immediate, unrefined emotions interfere with that objective, logical processing. So, what happens when we try to take the wheel of our brain's internal simulation? If we employ reality testing to spot rendering errors while we sleep, like checking to see if text remains stable when we look away, we can actually reactivate our logic centers, specifically the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And by reactivating that logic center, we transition from being just a passive observer in a standard scripted dream to an active participant in a lucid dream. It is essentially our biology's native virtual reality. We gain incredibly high intentional control over the dream's physics. Pushing this frontier even further brings us to the very edge of life itself. Near-death experiences, or NDEs, completely challenge the boundaries of life as we know it. As measured by the Grayson scale, people frequently report these massive panoramic life reviews and profound feelings of peace. Now, the biological theory argues this is just oxygen deprivation and a massive flood of endorphins causing a brain-induced hallucination. But the transcendental theory asks a huge, paradigm-shifting question. Is consciousness strictly localized neural activity, or is it something non-local, like a substrate-independent field capable of existing entirely outside the physical body? Clinical studies like the AWARE project are actively trying to map this incredible frontier. Which brings us to Section 4, the Type I transition. Resolving these deep mysteries forms the blueprint for how we're going to adapt our biological brains into a highly advanced global civilization.
Bridging the gap between our messy evolutionary past and artificial intelligence is going to require a total mastery of our internal psychosomatic mechanisms. Think about it. AI already uses a form of digital intuition for large-scale statistical prediction. Meanwhile, brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, are currently being developed to stabilize our internal dream states for advanced human-machine interfacing. And if NDE research eventually proves that consciousness can be isolated, well, that lays the literal roadmap for mind uploading.
Bringing this all the way back to where we started today, let's look at the incredible potential of Frisson, those musical chills. If we can truly harness the mathematics of Frisson, future civilizations could intentionally engineer highly targeted acoustic environments. Imagine a society that uses precise soundscapes for high-speed stress recovery, literally triggering measured dopamine releases on command. We could utilize these acoustic violations of expectation to create deep collective emotional synchronization during social rituals. We'd effectively be using sound as a non-invasive interface for mass neural enhancement. The exact same chills you get from a great song today, that could very well be the healing medical technology of tomorrow.
We are standing right on the bridge between our deep evolutionary past and an absolutely unimaginable digital future. So, as you reflect on the glitches in your perception, the mathematical beauty of the chills running down your spine, and the sheer limits of your intuition, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder today. Is your mind purely an ancient biological machine, just running outdated survival code in the dark? Or is it already the foundational node for a future Type 1 digital consciousness? Thanks for joining me for Lesson 7, and I'll catch you in the next one.